And now, your American dream, a home you can call your own. Since the COVID disruption, more and more people have been scrambling to find new homes, to move to the suburbs, to work from home offices, fresh air neighborhoods, and a two-car garage. The jam party lasted for nearly 2 years, and now we are in a new phase with much higher prices, higher mortgage rates, new young buyers, but a shortage of inventory, a recipe for confusion for buyers and sellers alike. Earlier, we spoke with an expert in the field here in Dallas, Healy. Welcome to our set for the first time.
Thanks for having me for the first time.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of real estate?
I think I'm realistic, and I think my realism probably is coupled more with optimism than being pessimistic, in large part because I live it and I see it. But good, bad, and different. I'm based here in Dallas, where this has been the unicorn real estate city now for a few years. But we don't see what other people do. But still in tune with the news, and yeah.
And key to that unicorn city and some other cities across the United States, I want you to get into this,
sure,
is the millennials.
Right. Yeah, millennials, the people that we had to blame back when, the economy took an adjustment 10 years ago, real estate was public enemy number one. And now real estate has been kind of keeping our economy alive, especially these last few years. But you take a deeper dive into that, millennials were the fault, 10, 12 years ago, where they were spending their money on their rent and on their cars. And then something like COVID happens, you get to reset your priorities. All of a sudden, the American dream becomes the American dream again. So the housing market is right now dominated by millennials all across the country.
And there are some cities in particular that they're really attracted to. Go through some of them.
Sure. So I kind of coined the phrase forever cities, right? And I think that a cliche kid graduates college, they move to DC, they move to New York, they move to Chicago, maybe LA, Miami, et cetera. But they move there with the intention of always moving back home or to a city that's like a version of that. But what we started to see happen right before COVID was these mini cities like a Charlotte, Atlanta, Spokane, Washington, even Denver, Nashville, Dallas, Houston, et cetera, these places that kind of just make sense to live there forever. And all of a sudden you look up and you're 30, you're 35, you have a family, and it becomes your home. So I think those cities are quietly, not as quietly as they were, but they're quietly driving the market now. Before, in the conversation was the Miami, the LA, New York City, et cetera. But now we have people that are going to go live in a place and make it their home. And they're not just working there for a job, they're making it their life.
And if you want to have a family, those cities are certainly more appealing than, say, a New York, where if you have a car, you drive home from work and you can't find a parking place. So you spend 5 minutes looking for a parking place. If you have a kid or plan to have kids, that just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and unless I think that you actually grew up in the city, and I think Manhattan is such a unique city in general, it's really fun. But, rarely do people look up when they're 40, like my age, if they're single, and be like, I'm so glad I married my job. Right? And I think from there they pivot and they go to a city that just kind of makes more sense. And I think that we've seen this evolution happen, which is Americana at its finest, but COVID, put gasoline on the fire like we've never seen before. You
mentioned the city of Nashville, and I have some familiarity with that. My daughter lives in Nashville,
cool.
And I have friends who live in Nashville. That city is now becoming pretty darn expensive, and so you see the rise and fall, the fluctuation of these cities and the marketability of them.
Yeah, but I think it's all relative. I think that what's interesting is even back, when the Big Short happened, 10, 12 years ago, Dallas specifically was in the same index as blue-collar cities. So when you compare Dallas to Pittsburgh, Oklahoma City, et cetera, it becomes, a different kind of mission to move there. But Nashville is still affordable compared to other big cities. But Nashville, I kind of talked about this, it's kind of where Austin was 10 or 15 years ago. People discover Austin, like, wow, unique city, culture, live music, universities, there's Vanderbilt and multiple schools there. There's room to grow. And with that comes an influx of opportunity, but also an influx of people. And when that happens, the affordability factor still goes down. But grand scale, it's a lot more affordable than these other large cities across the country.
What is Austin doing right now, by the way?
Austin, I'm a Texan. I love Texas, but Austin and I have never gotten along. I think it's a very inconvenient city.
Interesting.
But Austin has what everyone else wants no matter what. They have undergrad students of 80,000 people that fall in love with Austin and want to live there after they graduate. So they've got a historically low inventory problem, unlike any other city across the country, but it's also become a big tech city. So when you move people from California to Texas that want to avoid income taxes, then it changes things in general, too.
The big arts center as well, much like Nashville. Let me read a quote for you from the Wall Street Journal and get your reaction to it. Quoting now, home prices are up 44% over the past 2 years, but prices have cooled lately, and many homeowners are coming to grips with the reality. that they may not be able to get the same prices that their neighbors did. Roughly 1 in 7 homes on the market had a price reduction in June, according to Realtor.com. That is nearly double the rate of 1 in 13 homes a year ago. I guess this bodes well, again, for millennials, but for people who own pre-existing homes, that's a danger sign.
Yeah, it is and it's not. But if you think about it, most sellers are also buyers. So the money that they made, the last 2 years, and if they sold for an inflated number that eventually became, the standardized, number across the board, they had to go buy into something that was probably overpriced as well. So it's all relative. And I think the equities people are going to go and roll out of their house, they're going to roll into something different. But what's happened now is the mindset of living in a house forever, that's gone. Nobody is going to go look at something unless they're at a different phase in their life and say, I'm going to live here until the day that I die. It's probably a 3 to 5 year play. And I think that gave people a sense of urgency where people in my position, like a real estate broker, anywhere in the world, we have people that are going to be turning over quicker than they were in the past. And that presents a different kind of opportunity for everybody.
What is the fate, speaking of millennials, of the tiny house movement? Is that something lasting or is that a fad?
I think it's so stupid. And I'm happy to go on record saying that. If you think about it, I think it's in concept great, but realistically, when you think about living in 800 or 1,000 square feet, it's not that much more affordable because you have to go and pay for the foundation, you got to get the electrical pulled in, all the utilities, et cetera. And I think eventually, especially if you have a roommate, a significant other, or a kid, over COVID, we did this. And I think COVID gave us the ability to go and pivot and actually have the desire to have our own space. But I've never been a tiny house person, in large part because I probably can't fit in them, being 6'5". But yeah, I think that trend hopefully will be a forgotten memory.
And those who have second homes or looking for a second home, what's the future?
I do think that's where there's going to be opportunities to get a deal. I think that people, especially when you think about March through June of 20, the people that panic purchased toilet paper that had the money, they also panic purchased second homes. And if they paid a premium for that, and now the music is starting to slow down a little bit, there might be an opportunity. But again, COVID, for the most part, gave us a priority shift and the ability to go and say that family's more important than other things that we probably put a precedent on. And I think that secondary homes will still be in the market. But with that being said, when interest rates double to 6% for a standard buyer, they increase even higher for a second home. And people have to qualify for that, have enough cash to put down, which is a higher requirement than a first-time home or their residence. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a mix-up in that, especially in places that no one had heard of prior to 2 years ago.
Rogers Healy, if I was in the market to buy a house or to sell one, I'd call on you right now. Impressive guy. You make it very accessible to me. So.
Oh, well, thank you. It's time to make a move.
All right.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Rogers Healy, thank you very much.
Thank you.